Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Boardmasters with me, Chris Mullins, and today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on Ni No Kuni 2, the board game. And we've just finished our family playthrough of this, and I will put the link to that video down below. We've also done an unboxing that I will link below as well. But Ni No Kuni 2 is a game by Steamforged Games, who have gained a bit of a reputation for making games based off video game IP. So up to date, they've done Dark Souls, Resident Evil 2, Devil May Cry, Horizon Zero Dawn. I believe they're also doing one on Monster Hunter, which are all IPs I'm very familiar with in terms of my history in video games. But interestingly, it wasn't any of those that got me interested in the company. It was their latest Kickstarter, which is their own creation, and that is Bard Song, which is basically a dungeon crawler, but one which seems to have a very high narrative thread through it and has elements of like the old fighting fantasy choose your own, and because of that they've got Ian Livingstone, the creator of the fighting fantasy books, helping them out with the narrative, which has got me extremely excited because I loved those books growing up. So that was the game that got me interested and aware of the company. And from there, I found out about Ni No Kuni 2, which is a game I've literally finished in the last week on PS4. I played the first one just before that, and I loved the series. So I was hugely invested in the IP straight away, and given the extremely low price point, it was a game I was happy to take a risk on, even though the rating on BoardGameGeek is average at best. I think it's around 5.6, which is absurdly low for my feelings on it. I really enjoy this game, but we are going to keep the same review structure that we started with the Dinosaur Island review that I did with Chris, so I'll work through the same categories, and I'll start with the first one now, which is art style and theme. As I've already said, I am very invested in the IP, so I love the theme already because it's already attached to a game that I really enjoyed playing. The art style is absolutely gorgeous. Ni No Kuni 1, a lot of the animation originally was done by Studio Ghibli, which I love their work. Their art style is just absolutely gorgeous. And whilst they didn't do the art style for the sequel, obviously they did inspire the art style and they carried it on to not quite the same standard, but as good as they could in the sequel, and it still looked absolutely gorgeous and kept all of the charm. And that carries across well into the board game, I think. And as we said in the Dinosaur Island review, really, if you're highly invested in an IP, then you're already going to be having fun when just opening the box. So that may explain why I enjoy this game far more than the average do on BoardGameGeek. But the next section is components. And with this one, they're fairly basic, which is to be expected given the price point. I mean, it's in that £20 to £30 price bracket. It's got some very cute little miniatures of the four main characters in the game. Fairly good detail. They feel nice. They've got decent weight to them, and that can be said for most of the components, really. The cardboard punch-outs don't feel cheap in any way. The artwork for the Higgledies is really sweet and lovely and captures their personalities from the game. In terms of the cards, they vary a bit. For example, the enemy cards are absolutely gorgeous. They fully utilise the artwork from the game, and they've taken enemies directly from the game for each of their cards. The quest cards, whilst it was lovely to see they used the actual side quests from the game, and they're the side quests that you complete to recruit citizens to your kingdom of Evermore, which tracks with the objectives of this game. You are building Evermore, you're building your kingdom in order to resist the influence of the big bad, so Deloran and the Horned One. So it's really nice thematic touch that you're completing the same quests to recruit citizens in the board game that you would in the PlayStation game. But what got me onto that subject in terms of the quest cards, they are a bit plain for my tastes. The artwork at the top is really nice, but due to them having to have a space on there for your characters to go to signify your questing there, and then they've got the bottom half of the card is basically just white space because some of the quests have text there. And it, while I understand the necessity of that, it does harm the art style of it for me. So they're probably the one aspect, component-wise, I don't think is particularly great. But again, it's a very low price point, and for the main point, I really like the components and they feel fine. They don't detract from the experience in any way. On to the third category, and that's accessibility. In terms of the main hurdles that you get in terms of a game, as I've said, the price point is very low, so that's not a gateway that takes much to get through. The last review obviously we did on here was Dinosaur Island, which has a massive setup and teardown time. That isn't the case for Ni No Kuni at all. You'll get it set up within a couple of minutes and packed away within a couple of minutes as well. In terms of the difficulty and learning the game and getting into it, as you'll know if you watched our playthrough, my son absolutely loves this game, and he's 7 and had probably a better understanding of the rules than me and Stace, the way he's explained everything in the video. So it's not a game that is overly complex. It's a great family weight, lightweight gateway game basically. And expanding on that, going into replayability, this is the category where I thought this game would really fall down, but actually it's pretty good, especially when you compare it to other games in the similar price bracket like Ticket to Ride and Takenoko, which are games we love, but you're essentially doing the same thing every time, and there's a little bit of difference in terms of what cards you get and what objectives you get, and then the variability comes through your interactions with your opponents. Whereas this one is cooperative, so you don't have that, so I was worried that the replayability wouldn't be there. But they have 4 main characters who each have different strengths and weaknesses, and on top of that they also have their own individual player skill, which obviously adds a layer of depth and gives you a reason to play it multiple times, so you can get used to each of the characters. In terms of the way the game is structured, the quests are randomly drawn, the enemies attached to those quests are randomly drawn, there are 2 big bad enemies to choose from, so there's even a choice there. Even coming down to the kingdom cards, they're randomly drawn as well, so no 2 games are ever likely to be the same, because you'll always have different decisions to make and a different conversation to have with your allies, and a decent amount of strategy and depth. So whilst it certainly isn't the deepest experience where you're going to have a 50-hour narrative, which I know is in vogue at the moment, and well, we've got one to my right here in the War of Mine, which is more focused in that regard. This is not a game that's going to stand up to that sort of replayability, but again, that's not really what I would have expected from a £20 to £25 game. And the final one we're looking at is the overall gameplay. This is a bit more hit and miss out of all of it. I like the basic gameplay. It is fun. I do enjoy it. I really enjoy playing this with the family. My only issue is the random nature that helps the replayability does kind of hurt the gameplay to an extent, because from our experience so far the game is a bit too easy, and basically that's going to come down to the random nature of how you're drawing it. A lot of the time either we just don't get the really strong enemies coming out, we're fighting the basic ones where you only need to roll 5, 6, 7 from 3 or 4 dice, which obviously isn't much of a challenge, or we get the luck of the draw where we've got a really good quest card where you earn 6, 7, even 8 resources, and attached to that is an enemy, as I already mentioned, a weak one that you only need to roll a 4, 5 or a 6. And in order to complete the quest you need to have 3 characters on it due to the strength of the quest, which makes the battle incredibly easy, and that just harms it a bit, because as long as you're hitting those high resource quests, you're going to have no problem buying your buildings and developing your kingdom, which builds your influence then to beat Deloran or the Horn One and win the game. I don't imagine it'd be particularly hard to house rule the game to make it a bit harder. It's not something I've tried yet because I don't feel particularly experienced enough in the hobby to do that, I think if there was maybe individual decks where you had an easy quest deck, a medium quest and a hard quest, and then related to that an easy, medium and hard monster quest, so that you knew you were always getting the monsters where you have to roll 18, 19, 20 on your dice attached to the 6, 7, 8 resource cards, so that the risk v reward was much more apparent. You are more likely to fail your quests if you go for the big bads, and in which case then it just adds far more depth and tactics and choices to the game, which is what I really enjoy, because the risk versus reward is heightened, whereas at the moment when we've played it has always been a fairly easy choice. But that being said, it is still a really fun game in our opinion. We really enjoy playing it, and particularly if you love the game, the IP, if you're looking for a nice lightweight family game that children can pick up and understand, then I would highly recommend this. And again, for the right crowd, this is an absolutely brilliant game, I think. It's probably not one I'd recommend if you're all serious gamers for a proper gaming night. It's not really going to stand up to that unless you really house ruled it, in which case then it maybe could. But as it is, it's a game that I would highly recommend for families or anyone just getting into the hobby. And as such, I'm going to give it a similar score to what I give Takenoko, and that was an 8 out of 10. It may have been a lower score if I wasn't invested in the IP, I'm not sure, but I really, really love this game, and for the right crowd, I really highly recommend it. So if that applies to you, give it a go. But with that being said, that's this review finished. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for spending the time with me. Hope to see you again soon. Have a good one. Bye bye now.